Right then, another golf vlog. I know we've been a little bit lackadaisical with them. We've done quite a lot of little bits of stuff that we hadn't sort of thought were either interesting or easy to vlog, so we've not really done that. So we'll try and catch up on the actual car when it's next in workshop and we're doing some stuff on it. So what we've got going on here is loads of gearbox related stuff. So I'm not quite sure where I'm going to start here, so if it seems a bit disjointed, it's because it is, and there's no good way of starting this. So anyway, the gearbox that we're working on is a DSG at the minute, but we'll talk about the manual gearboxes first, and then we'll move on to the DSGs. So over there is basically the full gear set out of an Ibiza Cupra, which is the same gearbox that we used to run in our Ibiza. Now, when we're doing some calculations, we were speaking to SQS when we had the gearbox failures. So we've had 2 failures now, which Mel will put the videos of what happened with them in. So we had some problems with them, and we're not 100% sure if what we've done is going to fix them. So what we've done now, the third gearbox that's in the Golf, is a shorter ratio. So we're using a LHD, and then that meant we were in just third and fourth gear a lot, and it were always fourth gear that's stripped. So what we decided to do, we'll go for a shorter ratio gearbox again. So then we ended up using a bit more in fifth, and that gearbox is in the car now, and it seems to be behaving. So rather than waiting until it's blown up again and causes some problems, we're going to have a little bit of time before we go racing to get some more stuff done. So what we've decided to do, we'll speak to SQS, and they said that they can sort of some stronger gears out. So they're not straight cut, but they're stronger. So where the Cupra gearbox comes into the equation, we can put the Cupra gear, the Cupra final drive and the Cupra first and second into a Mark 5, Mark 6 O2Q, that's an O2M. We could put it into an O2Q casing that fits straight in our Golf. And that gives us a really nice long first, long second. And then if we fit these, which are the new gears, which they're a little bit out of reach, but we'll sort of come to that in a minute. But these are the SQS gears. That only replaces third, fourth, fifth and sixth. So now I've got them written down here. These are the ratios. So I don't know if it's going to focus properly at them. But these are the sort of speeds in each gear at 5,000 RPM that the Ibiza would do on the Ibiza tyres. And then these are the speeds that our GUC ratio with the SQS gears would do. Now, the next ones there are what the PBF DSG, which has been a pain to get the gear ratios from, because you've got to strip them down and count the gears individually to know. But as you can see, the gear ratios are not really too bad in the DSG. We'll be using fifth gear a little bit more, I think, than what we had done in the other gearbox, which that were geared a lot more. But the Ibiza we did use fifth a bit as well, so that's why we didn't really have as many gearbox failures, we think, in the Ibiza. So they're what we found, but anyway, that's by the by. So basically, the idea with these gears came the other day. We're meant to just be throwing them in the gearbox, which we've already got the casing supports and everything that we had before, which we'll put some pictures of them in. That should have been fine. We're going to modify the input shaft when it came, put the little pilot bearing on there and make that stronger as well. But when this came, DPD had absolutely smashed the box to bits, and they've damaged all the gears. So see, that gear's all smashed, which that's first gear anyway, so second gear. So that weren't too big a deal. We just nicked another second gear out, another gearbox, but bits missing everywhere. But it also damaged the input shaft gears, and it's damaged the edges of these new ones, wherever it is. There's some damage on it somewhere. There you go. There's some bits of damage here and there, which is not horrendous, but when you're building a gearbox that's going to cost you 2 or 3 grand, you definitely don't want damaged gears. So a little bit annoying. So that's what that gear set's for. We're going to have to use that gear set again, get some new bits from SQS, build the gearbox, and then potentially, depending how long we've got to wait for the next bit of racing, potentially we're going to put the SQS gearbox in there and use the other one as the spare. Now what all this stuff is the DSG, which I mentioned before. So we've already got the SQS diff, which is the same as what we've got in the manual gearboxes that we've got. So we're going to have 2 manuals and a DSG. This is the plate type diff, so we'll try and put a picture of like an exploded diagram of how these work, but you basically got all carbon plates that'll, when there's a difference in wheel speed, the ramps inside it push the plates together and you end up sort of not locking the diff completely, but locking it more than an open diff would. Literally an open diff, it's all just floating around, and whichever wheel's got the least resistance will get all the power, which is obviously the opposite of what you're wanting. But anyway, we're not getting to differentials again. So the only thing to consider when putting a differential in a DSG car is how many teeth this little ring gear's got here, which we've pulled it off on this original diff so we can get in and drill the rivets. But what this is for, which we'll go down to the gearbox casing and have a look, that is still warm, which is not ideal. But basically what this does, that sits there in the gearbox, and when you put it into park, this little thing here engages with that there. So that poses another problem for a racing car, because it's not likely to happen, but the possibility of it happening is probably higher than in a road car. So to get this lever to move, I've not got the mechanism anyway. The mechanism's over there. I'll nick it. But basically, to get it into park, all you have to do is push that forward and push it in. That's what activates this cable. Now that won't go back, because to get it out of park or to get it into park, you've got to be depressing brake, which is only electronically controlled through all this wiring here. How you do that? Now, if you're pressing the brake hard enough, and for some reason you knock that, or you're using it in Tiptronic mode or whatever, and you knock it into park, which is, I'm sure it's possible. What you're going to have is, you're going to be doing 100 mile an hour or whatever, and you're going to have that big anchor, which it looks just like a boat anchor, is going to just shove you into park. One of the other things we're going to have to do is get rid of all this mechanism and blank it off, because we don't want that, we don't need it. And what we might do, which Chris, who helps us out a little bit when we're first doing this project, what he does, he turns this around so that the upper gear is backwards and downer gear is forwards, like a normal gearbox should be, like a sequential one. Whether we do that or not, I'm not too sure. But this DSG conversion is only going to happen if we have any more problems with manual gearbox. We're going to have everything ready to do it, and if we don't end up doing it, we don't end up doing it. But there's a potential as well that we'll just take the plate diff out and put a quaif in and put this gearbox in the Arosa. So it's not all fruitless what we're doing now at the minute anyway, so it's no big deal. But we'll sort of have a quick look at the George shouting his head off here. Idiot. So we'll look at some of the, while we're down here looking at the case, and we'll look at some of the reasons why people always ask us, is the DSG strong? Is it strong? Is it strong? Would I be better off converting to a manual? And generally, from what we've seen, some of the fastest cars in the world, definitely the drag racing cars, and some of the faster track cars, like all the TCR cars, run DSG gearbox, and I don't believe anybody has really too many problems with them. So this is why we think they're stronger. But if you look at the casing, this is an O2Q casing. So as you can see, everything's just bigger in the DSG. There's a lot more webbing, a lot more triangulation. There's a lot going on inside. Obviously, like the bearings are bigger. Everything's just a lot meatier. And that's probably one of the contributing factors. I don't think it's the main one, but we'll have a look up at the gears now and see. Like if you look at the gears themselves, I'd say the gears are going to be no stronger whatsoever. They're nothing really fancy looking. Maybe they're a little bit better finished, some of them. Definitely the selectors look a little bit sort of better quality as such. But the one thing's for certain, you're not gonna be able to select two gears at once. And really, it doesn't matter that much on a DSG because you've got two clutches. But anyway, but you're taking the driver error element out of the equation because the electronics are going to tell it to go into the gears. But one of the other things as well, how the input shaft works, as you can see, you've got your odd and your even gears are on a sort of separate input shaft. So as you can see, one of the big things with the manual gearboxes is the deflection or the bending that the input shaft does. So you've got really nice bearings. Obviously this input shaft's it's got a little hole through the middle of it, you know, it's not completely solid, but it's a lot beefier and got a lot more support than the manual. So it's inherently going to be stronger anyway. So coupled with the casing and the input shaft, the gears are all going to be held together because obviously the O2M and O2Q is what normally happens. The manuals, it spreads apart. One of the other things that makes these a bit stronger, they've got oiling. Like there's a few of these kicking about in the gearbox, all squirting oil directly at the gears, so none of the gears can run dry, so you're not going to have a surge issue like you do in a manual gearbox. The selector forks, they've all got nice bearings on them rather than just bushings, so they're not going to have any flex in them. For some reason, I've got like this weird spray-on coating as well, like where normally you'd have like a, I don't know if it's got like a little bit of plastic on it, it feels weird, I don't know what it is. It's like a sticky, rubbery, metal-infused spray, but it's weird. But obviously they look fairly strong, and they're obviously steel already, which don't cause as many problems as the brass ones do. And you've got a decent oil cooling system, which we'd add to this and make sure we keep it even cooler because the clutches do generate some heat. But then what you've also got, you've got a proper strainer system. So this is like just the same as like a normal automatic gearbox or whatever. You've got a proper strainer, so the oil is always going to be clean as well. So you've got stronger casing, stronger input shaft, oil cooling, oil squirters, oil filtration, no user error, and then you've got the dual clutches which are wet, and obviously you've got the flywheel, it's just sort of taking away the harmonics from the engine, which on a manual we always run a single mass flywheel because a dual mass won't last. But in a DSG you can't get a single mass, which I wouldn't run a single mass on these anyway. But you've got the dual mass in there, which is quite simple. It's not got the same heat going into the dual mass like a manual one would, which can start making the grease wear out, and that's what makes them fail as well. But you've got the wet clutch, which sort of, you can make them really aggressive between gears and just make the clutch just bang straight in. But because it's a wet clutch, you can also have it where it's just, as you're going into it from one gear into the next, it blends them in. It's not like a manual that's third into fourth, fourth into fifth. It's going to sort of go third into fourth, into fifth, and sort of slip the clutch slightly. So you're not going to have the same shock on the transmission or on the engine that you've got. So there's quite a number of things that are making these theoretically stronger. Obviously, if the gears are made of Swiss cheese, it's going to be weaker, but that's not what we've found. It's not very often you hear people just shredding gears on these BQ 250s. So then that leads on to, which the clutch, we're not going to how they come apart because we've done a video not long back, so we'll put a picture of one in if we really need to. But then that goes on to the valve body, mechatronics, whatever you want to call it. So that's the connector that's on the outside of the gearbox there. And this is what takes care of all the gear shifting. So this has got all solenoids on there and all electronics and everything that controls how everything works. Now the gearbox and the mechatronics communicate via CAN bus. So everything that the engine's doing, the gearbox knows, which on a road car, you want that because you want to know that the rear wheels are doing what the speed that they're doing, the front wheels are doing what they're doing. Is the traction control intervening? Is the engine doing this much torque or this much RPM? And then it keeps things going nice. That's why you get in a car that's automatic and it drives well. For a race car, we're not bothered about 95% of what goes on in that. So it's not often I like to go down this route, but for this car, or for at least if we're going to run it in the Arosa for definite, we want to sack off the mechatronics unit, or at least the electronic control side of that. So we've been speaking to HTG in Poland, and they've got a standalone controller that we're going to test. It might not work how we expect it to, but there's been really good reviews. A lot of people said it's like their UK distributor, I think it's Elise Racing, he said it's transformed some cars they've had. They've had a lot of problems with the tuning. And don't get me wrong, for the road cars, we need to understand these gearboxes inside out, the mechatronics and the control. That's absolutely critical for us. But for the racing, we'll spend more time sat at the side of the track scratching our heads, wondering why the gearbox won't let us change down, or why it won't let us change up, or why the clutch pressure's not where we want it to be, or why 5th into 6th is a bit slower than 4th into 5th. We just haven't got time for that at the racetrack. We want to test the hardware, make sure the hardware's working, isolated from the software, and then if we know the gearbox can change in this amount of time and the clutch can hold this sort of power, we then know for the road cars, we need to learn how to be tuning this better to make it do what we know the hardware is capable of doing. So it's not often we go to standalone, but for the Golf and for the Arosa, it's definitely going to be worthwhile. We're still running the OEM engine management, and that seems to work fine. But you are hacking away at that as well when you get to these sort of levels. So we'll see how that goes. We're going to send that off to them. We could do it ourselves, but it's a little bit complicated, and at least we want it, because we're going to be doing this for the first time here. I just said the first one, they take all the control board out and start putting wires in, and then those wires come out of a different connector that go to their standalone ECU, which that'll be it. You can feed the CAN bus in there and tell it what the engine's doing, or you can literally just let the GCU do what it needs to do via the paddles or whatever. Literally you'll just say pull, 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 and away you go. So we'll see how that all works out. We might end up not doing that and getting a different mechatronics. I'm not too sure, but yeah, we've got a lot to do. Paul's going to have 2 gearboxes to build when we get round to it, and then we're going to swap that one into the Golf, and hopefully, fingers crossed, that's super reliable and we don't even revisit this DSG stuff until the season's over. But if we have another problem with that gearbox and we're not at the track when it happens, or we've ruined a race and we're coming home, it's getting the DSG. So we might record Paul doing some more stuff on this if we get a chance. If not, cheers.